In the studio now, we've got Professor Paul Elliott. Good morning, Professor. The Professor's been commissioned to carry out the world's biggest ever investigation into the effects of mobile phones on young brains, on developing brains. And we're going to get the Professor's view on all of this. Also from Cambridge, we've got Liz Fraser. Liz is a parenting expert. Liz, before we get into what the Professor has to say, as any parent will know, kids are addicted to these things. They're not just phones, it's their life, games, television, everything is there. I mean, almost to call them phones is wrong, isn't it?
You're the first person I've heard say that, actually, Eamon, and I completely agree with you. If you talk to most teenagers about what they do with their mobile phones, they don't use them as phones, as you and I would understand a telephone, at all. They use them as computers, they use them for entertainment, they use them for communicating with their friends a lot, but not by not by speaking to them, by texting them, by sending them little messages, Instagram, that kind of thing, and Facebook messaging. So, actually, while I applaud any study that's looking into the health or otherwise of these things, we need to be very careful to remember how young people are using phones. And it's much less the phone attached to your head and much more this going on. OK. Professor,
who is commissioning you? Why are they commissioning you?
This is being commissioned by the Department of Health. And the reason is that there really hasn't been much research in children and use of mobile phone technology. Most of the research has been in adults. And so this is a bit of a research gap, and really to provide the evidence to support recommendations on how people, and young children in particular, should use the phone.
OK, so whatever they're doing, they're holding something that is emitting some sort of radio wave, and that is the concern. Is there cause for concern? Are there a lot of questions that need to be answered, or is this virgin territory?
As I say, it's pretty much a research gap. It's been identified by, for example, the World Health Organization as a research priority, but it's not because we have concerns. It's not like knowledge out there that this is harming people, but it's a question. And obviously, as you were saying, there's very widespread use of the phones and the technology, particularly when children move from primary to secondary school.
Okay. It's interesting what Liz was saying, that a lot of children aren't making calls. They're not necessarily having their mobile phones on their pillows. They are using it for gaming or texting, all that kind of thing. Is that why your focus is not so much on the radiation side of things, but on the effects it has on, say, their attention span and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so we're looking at the complete use of the technology. And you're right, it may be that actually some uses could improve ability to carry out certain tasks, because people get very good at using the phone, playing games. But also, just looking at the behavioural side, children take their phone home with them, they take it to bed with them, maybe they're losing sleep, that could affect their educational performance. And we're trying to separate out these sort of behavioural effects from the actual radio waves that
influence that they make. Liz, obviously it's a big concern for many people, and as a parenting expert, is there a good age? Is there something that you would say? I tend to think that when children move from primary school to secondary school, that tends to be when most of them get a phone, but I may be well wrong on that. It may be happening earlier. And what is your view as a parenting expert on when they get them and how they and when they should be allowed to use them?
You're right, it does tend to be in that shift between primary and secondary, often because they're going a little bit further away from home. Also, they'll start to go to friends' houses after school, so you haven't got a clue where they are. And at that point, I think parents want to know, to be able to communicate. Children have mobile phones much younger than that, though, Eamon. They have them at 3, 4, usually as a games tool. And actually, I think what the gentleman was saying is very, very interesting, that we're going to look into the changes in the way their brains sort of work in terms of memory and speed and things like that. Because really, these days, you don't really have to remember anything. Nobody has to remember anything, because anything these kids want to know, they just quickly check it, which is good in other ways, because they're very quick and they're good at finding material. But it really is affecting them in the way that they think, the way they use their minds, and it can affect them in terms of their psychology and their self-esteem as well. We know this, that children are seeing these amazing images of all their friends having a great time, and they can feel a bit insecure. I'm really glad this survey's going on, but last point, that parents mustn't take away from this, the radio waves are damaging my children's brains. That's not the message, and that's certainly not the message that you're putting across today, but it's just important to remember that.
Yeah. And we should say, yeah, Liz, just to the professor here, scientific evidence available, and you were saying this, is quite reassuring actually, because it shows no association between exposure to radio frequency waves and brain cancer in adults. But this is very much a long-term policy that you're pursuing.
So we're doing another big study called the Cosmos study, which has nearly 300,000 people in it from across Europe. The largest contributor is in the UK, where we have over 100,000 people. And we're looking at people's use of the phone and their phone records in relation to their long-term health outcomes, looking both at cancer but also at other diseases such as neurodegenerative disease. So, but it is a very long-term program.
Good luck with what you're trying to do, Professor. Appreciate your time this morning. Liz, just before I leave you, just one quick one, because a lot of parents will try and do that sort of detox thing with phones with the youngsters. Easier said than done. Have you any tip on that, any recommendations as regards that?
I say two things. One, you have to lead by example. If they see you on your phone, 10 hours a day, it's going to come as a bit of a weird thing to tell them to put it away. So lead by example and educate them. You have to educate them, take it away, and tell them why. Tell them why you're taking it away. It's not a punishment. You're actually trying to help them. They're not going to like to hear that, but that's the line that I use.
Liz, appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.